Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. I am your host, Juma Kay, also known as June. And today I am with my badass, booty shaking Bodhisattva sister, Charlotte Nguyen.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Charlotte is a spiritual and transformational coach, continuously asking how to live a life of service that can lovingly overturn the status quo. After the death of her first love in 2007, she began a journey to learn how to be free from suffering. Meditation, movement, and activism each played a role, weaving together her love of spiritual practice, social action, and creative expression. And in 2017, which was around the time that we met, she became the founder of Get Free, a wellness consultancy and community that helps change makers become more inspired and emotionally healthy through the transformative power of mindfulness. And since that time, it's been such a privilege to witness the way she's served hundreds of people through personal development, helping them cultivate lives full of trust, confidence, intimacy, connection, mindfulness, and compassion with themselves and all their relations. She's very humble, as you can already tell. No, but I know that it's taken such a journey to be able to get to this place, and it has been like, wow, I'm just in awe of how I feel like our ancestors reconnected us in this lifetime, because you're the first Southeast Asian sister I met who was doing the darn thing. And I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you, even though we're just at the beginning of our conversation. So,
Yes,
um,
so much gratitude for
yeah.
the
So, in
invitation.
your own words, Charlotte, well, first tell us, where is it that you're currently calling home, and how would you describe your medicine?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, just so much gratitude for the invitation to be here, June, and for all of you who are listening for coming and gathering with us. Like, this is a collective experience, right? And just a lot of gratitude for allowing me to share this moment with you. My name is Charlotte, and I am joining us here today from Los Angeles or Tongvaland. And the second part of that question was,
How would you describe your medicine in your own words?
oh, wow. Wow. So I think I'd love to start. Well, I'm a spiritual transformational coach and the creator of a business called Get Free, where I specialize in the healing and liberation of people of color. And I would describe my work in the world as just it's my job, my craft, my joy, my purpose, my heart to traverse the place of life's spectrum that people don't want to go into. That's kind of my jam, right? The places that are challenging to go through and walk with them hand in hand and help them move through it to the other side, and supporting them in doing that inner work that's needed to get free so that they can make that divine contribution that they came here to be, right? And create that more beautiful, more just world that their hearts know is possible, right? So I do group programs and private mentorship and retreats and workshops where I support individuals in looking at the places where we all want to have abundance and excitement and radiance. And these are often things that have been taken away from us, right? From like the dominant paradigm. And it's just made like money into this capitalist structure and like sex as part of this religious thing that we have to control, and spirituality and magic that's associated with like, witches and new age hippies and white people. And it's just like, no, let's get to what this is really, really about. And so I've been in the practice of redefining my relationship to those things for years and years and years so that I don't feel guilt around and shame around that anymore. And so the inspiration for my work is, how can I share that with you all? Like, how can I share that so that you don't feel guilt and shame around sex anymore, so that you don't feel like you have to stay in the spiritual closet in order to be a business owner, so that you aren't as scared of money or afraid of money. Like when you pull out your bills, you're not like, and you feel like a stab of pain in your belly. Like when you open, when I used to open up my bank account on my phone, I would get like a rapid heartbeat, and I learned how to actually flip these moments into magical moments. Like the same with talking about sex. When I was coming into my sexuality as a young girl, I would feel ashamed. I wouldn't want to tell other people my desires and my fantasies. I thought there's something wrong with me. So when you asked me to do this interview, June, I was like, yes, I have a lot to say on this because I've healed through some of this and turned a lot of pain and trauma and discomfort and confusion into like an amazing, beautiful, abundant business and relationship around healing and money and sex and spirituality. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I remember when you posted something about like I don't it wasn't an I don't know what I am from a place of loss and victimhood, but this liberation from being able to release all of our titles. Like what uh, a coach, there's a lot of our people who have resistance even calling themselves a coach. I feel like it's because well, one, there's the fear of calling myself a coach, and two, because it feels so oversaturated that everybody's calling themselves one. And yet, both you and I have found that our medicine gets revealed by the people we support. And the outcome, it's going to be different for every individual. So that's why I invite people to release the title. And if you could describe your medicine without that label, then how is it that you would embody it? How is it that you can give me permission to feel what is possible in my body? So,
Mm, I love that. I love that. And even as you were like reading the bio, I like it kind of like aggravated in me a little imposter syndrome because I think I'm just someone who has insatiable curiosity and questions and theory about the status quo, right? And you know, in this life, like this is what I call myself now, right? Coach, healer, whatever. But I've been a sex worker, I've been a nonprofit worker, I have worked in crisis counseling, I was a babysitter, I used to waitress, I used to dishwash, I was a hostess at Chuck E. Cheese. Like our purpose is not our job, right? Our genre is not our job. It's our essence, it's the vibration that we hold. And regardless of whether I continue doing this job or not, my purpose in this life is to hold the frequency of love and freedom. Like that's what I'm here to do, right? And whether that's a mother, whether that's like a coach, it doesn't really matter. That's it's like that underlying thing that doesn't change, you know. So I totally agree. Like releasing the label, releasing the taking career out of the purpose and just surrendering into like what is the vibration that I'm here to hold, you know.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. And one thing that I love everything about you, but one thing that has spoken to so many of us who follow you on Instagram is how you're able to hold these dualities of identities that may seem like they are in total conflict with one another. So you've been talking about sex a lot, and yet you came into this
Is that
wanting to be a
true?
meditation guide. I'm like, wait, she didn't mention anything about sex in her bio, but um and I feel like as Asian American women, this is something that we don't talk about. So, okay, tell us about your ancestral lineage and how you feel this is influencing the way that you're showing up today.
Mm, cool. Yeah. So, I think, I guess where I always love to start, my family came to the US as refugees via the Vietnam War. And so, in some way, that legacy of trauma has always, I think, given me a lot of commitment and urgency around suffering and how to heal from suffering in the world. And I think just continuously asking how to lead a life of service that can lovingly overturn the status quo, you know. So that's kind of like the world that I was born into, the social justice kind of humanitarian world, even if we didn't call it that, right? Like I don't even know the words for social justice or humanitarian work in Vietnamese, but you know, my parents always kind of instilled in me stories of hardship and destruction and survival. And just I think growing up I was more exposed to images and stories of my people suffering than images and stories of my people thriving and being happy. Like my first images of Vietnamese people were like, you know, those black and white like images of the Vietnam War that you see in a history book, you know. And so it's taken me some time, a lot of like moral questions for me to like honor that legacy of resistance, but to also be comfortable creating new ancestral wisdom, right? That like from that mud, like, okay, what's next? What's next after that? Right? What is the future that I envision for my people? And when I think about that, I think about like a well-rested people. I think about an abundant people. I think about a pleasure-filled generation, you know, where suffering is not our legacy. So that's kind of my connection to it all.
Remember that play you featured in? What is it, last year now? Was it a year ago?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I did a
Size.
performance art piece. Yeah, where I essentially just force the audience to watch me nap for 5 minutes.
So cool. We had just came back from Bali as well. And so you were wearing I think you were wearing the sarong that we got from
Yes.
Bali. And I was like, oh my God, yay, Charlotte's coming up. And literally there is a bed on the stage. And you walked in. I was like, oh my God, what is Charlotte going to do? She literally crawled into the bed for the whole piece and napped. But there was tears in the audience. Why? Because there was the slideshow images of our relatives napping and enjoying themselves and braiding each other's hair. And I'm even emotional just thinking about it right now, because here, growing up in the United States, it's this hustle and grind mentality. And our people, they would wake up with the sun and
Mhm.
they would sleep with the moon. But most of them were done working by 9 a.m. after they tended to the fields, and the rest of their day was just relaxing and enjoying
Mm.
enjoying the crops that they tended to.
Mm.
And we have
Yeah.
forgotten that.
Yeah. I think really it's important for particularly Asian American people to hear that our people globally and historically have been experts of rest and relaxation. Like so much of what we currently understand to be wellness and healing comes from the continent of Asia, right? Like it's actually what we've done best, right? Like acupuncture is like bringing things into balance and resting. Like Tai Chi is about like restoring the nervous system. It's all like saunas, right? Like have you ever been to a Korean spa, like a Japanese spa? It's like globally and historically, no one does rest better than us. Like if you've been to Southeast Asia, it's shit is hot. Like people do not want to, people don't like working hard, right? Like they look at us like we're mad because they're like, why do you work so much? You know? So yeah, I think it's important when I think about ancestral remembrance, like that's the thing I have to rewire is like, okay, like US based like context, my American experience as an Asian American is like, okay, we're good at math and we're good at computers and we're really hardworking. And it's like, actually there's something deeper. There's something older, more ancient, more abiding, right? That defines us as a people.
Yet you have a successful six-figure business, and I see that you're constantly posting about the need for rest. But it again, that seems like it's in total contradiction to one another. How is it that you can build a thriving business and take away the hustle and the grind? I feel guilty in my body thinking about resting, because I'm like, oh my God, my clients, and I got to create the content, I got to show up on social media. So where is it that you where is it that you find time for rest? And also showing up for your business?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, because it's not just rest, it's like making space for all of life, right? Like making space for rest, making space for my emotions, making space for like being human. And for me, it's like how do I balance that, right? Like how much time do we give ourselves for that, right? How much time do we give ourselves to like feel the feelings and then like write the emails and like do the entrepreneurial work? And for me, like I don't give myself a time limit. I don't, it's I would say, like, for anyone who's listening to this, the first place that I go is like, I get support from my community. You know, I give myself as long, I get support from community. I make sure I have people who hold me accountable to, like, who are really good at catching my bullshit, right? Who are really good at like noticing when I'm edging, when I'm not taking care of myself. And like, for me, it's like, okay, you can do it Italian opera style, right? Where it's like, oh my God, woe is me, my emotions and my feelings, where you're just like walking around your house, like, oh, my life is terrible, right? And like, that's not what I mean by processing your feelings and being with your emotions and like resting. Like, I'm not talking about going on the other side of the pendulum. I'm talking about like, okay, listen, boo, it's time to be quiet and cry. Like, it's time to write in your journal. It's time to go to sleep. It's time to lay on the floor and do some practice, do some yoga, do some meditation, and like be with your feelings, like be with your body instead of eating them, drinking them, right? Instead of pretending that they don't exist. And yeah, I think, I mean, I guess to answer your question, like, how do I find time for it all? First of all, like, I don't do it all, right? Like, whenever I wake up in the morning and I like think about all the things I need to do, there's like, do, don't do, delegate, do now, do later, delegate, don't do, right? And like, something always needs to be put into the delegate list and the don't do list. Like, something's got to be taken off the plate, because knowing myself and knowing my constitution, I'm like a triple fire. I have like Aries 3 places in my chart. Like, everything about my body and my constitution is like go, 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 work, 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 ambition, drive, passion. So I really gotta like pull it back, you know? So yeah, I think that answers your question.
Let's talk about the evolution of both of our journeys, because we met when we both transitioned out of the nonprofit industrial complex. You were, I mean, not that there's a time limit or comparison, but you technically started a year earlier than me. And so I just remember watching you launch your first offerings and the fear of charging for it. And then, of course, same thing happened with me until now. We've titrated ourselves to be able to charge what it is we do today because of our lived experience. We have evidence of our medicine and the journey that we can take our clients on. But I feel like when you first started, yes, the brand was primarily about meditation and mindfulness. And then it was around 2018, 2019, where suddenly your content started to shift, or at least be unapologetic about sensual liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when a lot of us were like, wait, I'm confused. Is Charlotte a meditation teacher, or is she a sexuality coach? What is she? But I also feel like the moment that you stepped into that, one, it gave us permission to expand outside of these boxes and these labels that we feel like we need to fit in. And also, that is when I witnessed so much more abundance and ease start to enter through your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy to say, oh, it's easy for Charlotte
Mm-hmm.
because look at her social media, look at the way she moves her body or whatever. But we also know that it's not like that all the time. So tell us about where that shift was for you. How is it that you expanded beyond just saying, I'm a meditation teacher, and have actively started to, I don't want to say incorporate either, but have started to express the importance of sexual liberation as a part of our spiritual journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that question, like, there's a little bit of like background that I think kind of helps inform that. So I grew up in a Catholic and a Buddhist family. And my father's side is really Catholic and traditional Catholic space. So I went to a Catholic church, and it was so, I remember as a little girl, it was just so internal. Like, nobody was feeling any feelings. You know, it's like the opposite of going to a gospel church in the South or something, where there's like ecstasy and bliss and movement. In the Catholic church, it was just like, I remember a priest being like this old white man, like standing in front talking about alienation. And I remember thinking, like, Jesus, like, what's an alienation? Like, he was just saying something about being alienated from God. And I was just like, oh, this is so dry. Like, can we dance a little bit maybe? And like, bless my mother, she's a Buddhist. And she would take me to the temple as a little girl. And I went to my first spiritual teacher when I was 12, who gave me a lesson about karma and explained to me that's why I was here on Earth School, to learn certain lessons and alleviate suffering in the world. And he taught me this when I was 12. But like through that time, I was told repeatedly that I was a sinner, just like banged over the head at all the church groups. You're a sinner. Homosexuality is bad. You're bad. Don't wear that. Your shorts are too short. You know, you look a whore. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm 12. And that was just so confusing for a young woman. And I'm not the only one, you know, like so many women. It's just like you're told you're bad. And the moment that your sexuality starts to blossom, it's like your power, you're coming into your power. And it's like, no, you don't get that power. Put it away. Like, be skinny, don't talk too much, like look normal, act normal, because you're really this fountain of energy and gorgeous beauty. And like there's so much power. If you've ever seen a young woman, and I don't mean this in like a creepy way, but like a teenage girl blossoming, it's like watching a rainbow form in the sky, right? It's so beautiful. And there's something so beautiful about knowing a woman is entering into her power. So it's just this weird thing all of a sudden where you're becoming this powerful sexual being, but like covering your boobs and like strapping down them and putting on tight pants, and like you just keep it all together and trying to make it stop. So luckily, I think because of all the work that, you know, the legacy of like women of color who've come before me, who've done this work, that people are kind of moving away from that, like growing from that, and not thinking that sexuality is something that needs to be contracted and constricted. And we still have a long way to go, but I just bring that up to say, like, I feel that side of me, like the brazen part of me and the Catholic stuff. It's like my soul chose these two environments to show me these two polarities, which I use a lot in my business. You know, it's this archetype of two different energies: the sexual expressed energy and the non-expressed sexual energy. And both are great. You know, there are times where your sexual energy can actually be turned into like compassion and this beauty and that silent, beautiful energy of a Buddhist nun, and then turning it into something else and accessing the sexual expressed energy, and how that can move towards, for me, a passion for writing, a passion for service, for creating change in the world, for inspiring other women and people of color to be themselves. So I've always had this sort of duality between these two shifting things. I like to wear, you know, the lingerie and the 8-inch heels when I'm on a pole. And I'm also extremely comfortable being completely covered head to toe in ceremonial robes when I'm serving tea ceremony in, you know, muted monastic clothing. So I love these two types of myself, like the saint and the brazen woman, you know.
I love how it's not the saint and the sinner, but the saint and the sexually liberated version of myself. I
Yeah,
just
totally.
and both you and I were raised in Buddhist households, and I just imagine, like, my mom, she prayed that I would become a nun because she didn't want me to suffer like how she did as a mother who felt like she was not only parenting me and my sister, but also my father.
Mm.
And it's so beautiful to see that we can still, well,
Yeah.
not necessarily live the life as a nun, but still be able to share our dharma and these spiritual teachings without feeling like shaving our heads and wearing a robe is the only way to do so.
Yeah, it's not the path for anyone, for everyone. You know, it's like sometimes I'm really hard on myself when I don't, when I'm not like as regulated as I'd like to be, or as like as mindful as I'd like to be. And then I'm like, if I wanted to be a Buddhist nun, then I would have chosen that path. Like, I'm a layperson. I'm out here like in Los Angeles, living in the city, right? And that's the life that I've chosen for myself, you
Yeah.
know? So Yeah, really, it's about like being comfortable with like the aspect of yourself that is this like higher self, like the saint like person, and also like I'm a human being. If your soul wanted to be a god, it would have chosen to be a god, but it chose to be human, you know, and to
Yeah.
embrace that. Yeah.
And to also embrace that those are not mutually exclusive, that the God in me sees the God in you.
Mhm.
However, it's one thing. So, because you show these both sides of yourself, one where you are fully covered in tea ceremony, and then also you are showing yourself doing your exotic dance with your 8-inch heels and your lingerie, which can give a very mixed message to your followers. And I'm curious, how is it that you have learned to navigate these different energies that come at you? The
Mm,
criticism that you're doing this for attention, or even on the opposite side of the spectrum, the men or
mm,
all genders of people who are saying, oh, well, if you're doing this for attention, then let me go ahead and give it to you. And there's
mm.
the other side, which is criticism from our own people. So, where is the
Right.
balance? How's it that you even cope with that?
Right. Yeah. So like what do I do about the feedback, right? Like you're just doing this for attention or like unwanted kind of energies and
Well, and here's another thing.
mm.
I would just believe that Charlotte doesn't get any negative feedback whatsoever.
Mm. I see. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So let's get real, because I know that there's a lot of people listening who are like, oh, I want to put myself out there, but I don't want people to think of me in this sort of way. And I don't want that kind
Mhm.
of attention. Or what if people think that I'm just doing this to show off?
Yeah, right. Like what to do with the haters. Right?
Haters and potential lovers, I suppose.
I suppose. Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah, this is an interesting question. And I think in different phases of my life, this is manifested differently. Um, and from at least my spiritual perspective, we attract energetically the opposite or same sort of contrasting or complementary energy to where we are. And I don't mean that as in if you're having a bad day, it's your fault. But we attract what we need in order to learn something. So when I was younger, I would attract a lot of unwanted male attention. And I'm not blaming myself, but I also didn't know how to protect myself energetically. And I wasn't claiming a part of my feminine energy, which is essential, which was my fierce feminine. So I was claiming my sexy feminine, my kitten, sweetie feminine, like, and also my saintly mother feminine. But I was not claiming my fierce feminine. And so I was maybe 18 or 19 walking around Washington, D.C., where I went to school. And men would chase me, grab me. Someone once put their tongue in my ice cream, like someone masturbated in front of me on a train. And this was when I was 18 or 19. And I didn't know how to embody my sexuality with my ferocity and my power. And so I was, beautiful and open and dewy eyed, but it was like people wanted a piece of that so much. So then I learned, and I was probably 24 or 25 or something. I was riding the train overnight through Chicago. And they would just stop in the middle of the night and they would drop you off at the station for 5 hours for a layover or something. And I remember in the middle of the night, all of these men would come up to me and I just started going up to them and being like, like they would respond to that by like walking the fuck away from me. Like I would just like, or I would just like pick my nose or something and like growl at them and they would just walk away. And I started really understanding that the fierce feminine was so important to feminine expression. It's like that mother grizzly bear who is like warm and holds her cubs in her arms. That if you cross her boundaries and the things she holds dear, she will maul you and rip you to shreds in a second. And just like really getting to know my fierce feminine. And that's one that almost all religions take out, except perhaps like maybe Kali in Hinduism, and in Tibetan,
Green Tara.
green Tara, and in Buddhism, the fierce dakinis. But in the Western, there's no ferocity. We've got mother, we've got wife, and then we've got the whore. So this concept of the fierce feminine who is strong and protective, as if she's protecting her babies, and she could also be beautiful and vibrant and like a leader and a CEO.
Or
That
we call it masculine.
sure, right, sure, yeah.
As in, if women were to show up, because I hear this a lot, like, I just need to embody more of my masculine, as
Mm,
if for us to be fierce or ferocious to show that side of ourselves is not feminine.
right. And it's the same, we say masculine, feminine, yin and yang. And like the point of embodying it all is so that they all dissolve, right? So like the fierce feminine, the masculine, it's actually just the same thing. It's just the protector,
Yeah.
right? It's just the archetype of the protector, right? And yeah, there's just something that that clicks something in me. Like this is how I can walk through the world, being beautiful, being radiant, being magnetic, claiming my sexual power, but that I can walk through the world being me, and that I'm claiming this ferocity. So yeah, that's been a journey, and really reclaiming that and not being ashamed of having that fierce feminine and like the masculine self coming forward, and just being less stigmatized about it. Because the thing is, if you know who you are and if you believe in you, the greatest test of that will be that everyone else around you doesn't. And if you can keep believing in you, even though everyone else around you doesn't, then you fucking nailed it. I think.
Yes to that. And there's another thing that you are constantly bringing up, which I so appreciate, because I feel like as women and femmes of color who are on this path of reclaiming the medicine of our ancestors, that like I have a lot of white folks who are coming to me wanting permission to be able to practice, I don't know, like acupuncture or yoga. And I'm like, I'm not the gatekeeper of that. And I have a very challenging time wanting to even hold space for those kinds of conversations, which is why I have been calling in other women of color to work with so that we don't have to do that emotional labor of educating other white folks on like, oh, you're being a good white person. And yeah, I mean, I especially I've worked with white clients, and I love the ones who are on path of reclaiming their own European indigeneity and passing that on to their folks. But I feel like this is something that you've also had to navigate a lot, whether it's men who are looking for permission or like non-people of color. And so I'm curious about how is it that you've also been able to create sacred boundaries and know who it is you're willing to share that space with, or do that emotional labor with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when you're committed to showing up authentically, it it's gonna come up. Like, what are people gonna think about this, right? Is my family watching this? Is my ex reading this? It's like it's gonna show up. And I think sometimes I always joke that I was kind of born without that thing. Like I was born with a lot of things that are annoying, but I was like kind of born without that. Like, oh, what are people gonna think? But the thing that I do have is I love to be loved. So if something I'm doing threatens people loving me, then yes, it will be difficult for me. But I think it's rare now that anything I do threatens me being loved. Do you know why?
Why?
Because I already
Because
went,
you love yourself.
actually, because yes, and because I already went through those stages where I cut out the people who don't love me as me
Oh,
by
girl.
me. And that was tough. So, but I already went through that a few times in this life, and now the people who love me, they love me as me. They love me if I'm messy, they love me if I'm tired, if I'm weird, if I'm grumpy, if I'm triggered, if I'm in my wound, if I'm in my shadow, they still love me. And that's been super epic. So I'm not afraid of what people think. I don't want to lose the love of people around me. I also have in my astrology chart, my sun is in the 10th house. And that means that my life is about being seen. Like I've always wanted to be a dancer. I trained for years in the performing arts. So I have a lot of Aries energy. So I actually love offering myself as an avatar for others. I don't identify so much with this self. Like I
Yes.
do and I don't, you know? So I do in some ways. And it's like I I love making her, in a sense, the sacrificial lamb or the devotional offering to others. I kind of get off on that, you know.
Ah,
That makes me happy because I feel like if I can offer my experiences to others and if they help, I don't give a fuck what people think, right? So I think that's a hard one, you know.
yeah.
It's like how to lead other people through this, because it's what I do with so many of my clients, like help them feel comfortable being seen, sharing their voices, sharing their bodies, sharing their talents, sharing their anger, their rage, their love, whatever it is. For me, it's a part of my makeup, you know, that I love that. It feels really good for me to share.
Hearing sacrificial lamb, I'm like, no, Charlotte, don't sacrifice yourself, because I feel like we, especially for those of us who come from movement spaces,
Mhm.
it is the norm to martyr ourselves on behalf of other people's suffering. And I feel like there are a lot of people who, when they're stepping into entrepreneurship or charging for their medicine, one of the things that we constantly hear is, I want to be accessible.
Mhm.
And yet we know that if we open ourselves up to everyone, how oftentimes we can run the risk of pouring from our empty.
Yeah, but I also think sometimes you have to know what you've chosen in this life, right? It's like when I say sacrificial lamb, like that doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. That doesn't mean I don't have support. It's just like my makeup, right? It's just like what I've chosen. I am totally fine being the bad guy if it means like somebody gets to heal. Like this happens with my clients a lot, right? That like I trigger them, I upset them, I like they project onto me, and I take that, you know, because it's like I'm fine being the bad guy if it means you get to heal, because like I'm so protected within myself. Like I have so much safety within myself, you know. But it takes, it's not for everyone, you know.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a coach because it looks like it's easy money. And I know we're both just like, oh, this
Oh,
requires
yeah.
being able to tend to
Mm-hmm.
our own triggers. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not in the business to be liked. And I think that's the hardest thing about wanting so much to be loved and
Mm-hmm.
accepted by everyone, and yet committing to
Mm-hmm.
not only our own transformation, but holding that for others to
Mm-hmm.
also be true for themselves. So, how is it then that you can be in your Dharma
Mm-hmm.
and charge for your medicine
Mm-hmm.
unapologetically? Because I feel like there's so much stigma when it comes to charging or even money in general. And yet, it's been such a healing journey to see money as pleasure and creativity. So,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're triggering your clients or
Mm-hmm.
triggering other people who are paying you,
Mm-hmm.
how is it that you can lovingly hold these both to be true, that I can get paid for my medicine, and also I can,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the other contrast to that? Like I can get paid for my medicine and also I can be in my dharma. It doesn't have to be icky.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the money piece is like a huge piece when I talk about like protecting myself, right? It's like they hire you because they want you to deliver the hard truths, but when you deliver the hard truths, they want to fire you. You know, it's like
Yes, let's talk
you
about
know,
that.
yeah, that's a big thing, you know. And yeah, I also think there's just like a sort of masochistic part of me where like I love showing the worst and the best parts of myself. Like I like, you know, it's like a kink thing. You know, some people some people want to be told that they're the center of the universe, and some people want to be told like they're the scum of the earth, right? And there's just like something around like I'm willing I'm willing to like humiliate myself publicly if it means that like people learn something, right? Or like people get to heal from something. And I think like with the money piece, that's a huge trigger for people. Like when I talk about how I like am paying off my student loans, and I talk about like making a 6-figure year, like it really, really hits people in their core. And I think for me, growing up with immigrant parents, refugee parents from the Vietnam War who were constantly working, like waking up at ungodly hours to go to work, like coming home at ungodly hours from work, there's always this kind of lack in the air. And I started working when I was 14 at a restaurant at Chuck E. Cheese to make money. And I worked all through college, and I just spent a lot of time in this life working. And I still work a lot. I work really hard. And I think it's just my path this life. But there was a time where I shifted from this scarcity mindset. And I think a few years ago, 2017, I really had to tackle this money thing. And I was in debt from college, and I didn't know what to do. And I was working in nonprofits like you for most of my life. So I was making money, but I didn't use that money to pay off my student loans. Like my relationship with money was very tricky. And at a certain point, I remember sitting with myself, and my higher self was like, it is time for you to deal with these student loans and to make peace with money. And I was like, oh God, but I don't want to. I want to travel the world and da da da. I want to use it for that. And like, I don't want to pay off my student loans. Like, how come my parents didn't pay for college? Like everyone else's parents paid for college. And I was just pissed about that. And I finally got the fuck over that. And it was the moment that I decided, June, that it was possible for me to receive what I needed. It did. I fucking literally like 5 days after that awareness, I signed a contract with a really like the manager of a very, very famous performing artist to be his meditation coach for 10K. And I quickly made the money that I needed to pay off like a huge chunk of my student loans. Like the whole payment went off to my student loans. I have a background in nonprofit, and this nonprofit I was working at collaborated with like a bunch of celebrities to sponsor and fundraise. And the talent manager at the time was my friend who left that job to be this manager. And was making ridiculous amounts of money doing so, but needed a private meditation teacher to keep himself grounded. So I paid the 10K on my student loans in like 5 days after that moment. And there's still more. I have quite a bit of debt, and it might take a course of a few years. But I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. This feels so good. And from that, it gave me the boost. And literally that was faith, you guys. Like I had just left from another nonprofit job working in homelessness. So I was broke. I just didn't know what my next move was. And I was transitioning from being a nonprofit worker and service provider to being a coach and doing what I do now. And I said to some friends, I was like, I'm going to be a spiritual life coach. And I don't know where I'm going to get the money. My rent is about to increase. Like, I'm crazy. How am I going to pay my rent? What's going to happen? And the minute I said, fuck it, I'm going to ask my friend to take some professional portraits of me. I'm going to post it on social media and announce that I'm starting my practice as a life coach, and I'm now accepting clients. And I looked at my phone, and that's when a person DM'd me and was like, I'm in. Just tell me where to sign up. Literally a minute later. So I do find that you have to make space for the thing. And that was part of my healing. And then my healing process began around money. And it's just been a beautiful journey since then. But I had to work through those really hard moments where I was just like, fuck it, I'm about to take this risk by quitting this job that doesn't feel good anymore. But I needed to do that in order to create space for something better to come. And through that started healing around money. And like you, have hired coaches around money and mindset to teach me how to do that deep work around money, because it's so much, right? It's so much work.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who think that, well,
Mm-hmm.
and this may sound classist, but I can only speak from my own personal experience. What I had to learn, it was tough love on this journey for me, is that money was not the problem for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was the challenging time I had around being able to receive.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
especially coming from advocacy work, for you, it was homelessness. For me, it was domestic violence. Ugh, so much guilt on being able to get paid for my medicine when I would think back on my clients who didn't even have a place to live. But
mhm,
I had to do so much work, and I'm still doing this work around myself, that if I can, if I have a service or a product that I can give to people to support them in their own liberation and awakening, then why am I blocking myself from being able to
mhm,
receive that? Because if we can have more empowered women, femmes of color, step into this frequency of abundance, then we've taken over.
mhm,
But the internalized oppression is so deep that instead I feel like a lot of our time is invested in critiquing one another or
mhm.
being caught in the struggle versus what's possible on the other side of that.
Right, right. And I think you make a good point. Sometimes, and only you can know this for yourself, like only your own self-awareness and self-intimacy will let you know. Sometimes our money blocks are structural and systemic, and sometimes they're personal. Sometimes they're internal, right? You know for yourself if it's like something bigger is happening here that's like keeping me from being able to progress, right? It's like student debt is like a huge example of that, right? Like you tell low income people to invest in education so they can make money, but you put them in debt so that they can't make money. Like that's a systemic thing, right? Me not charging what I need to charge for my work and like continuously burning out because of that and like being afraid of being seen as a sellout for charging my work. Like, sure, there's systemic things informing that, but that's like also a choice that I'm making that I have to own up to, right? Like, you know, for yourself, if it's
Yeah.
you or if it's something bigger that's happening, right? And of course, there's like a mixture of both, but I do think it's important to be honest with ourselves, right?
Yeah, thank you so much for naming that, because I feel like this industry just like ingrains in us that it's mindset and it's like your own shadows, and it's so problematic because
Oh,
we're
it's
not
both.
talking about the structural systems that prevent a lot of us from being able to step into this role. So,
Totally. It's
hmm,
both. It's both. It's like as like a mental health professional, I can tell you that like yes, some people need therapy, some people need coaching. Some people also need a house.
hmm,
Some people just need money, right? It's
yeah.
there's no amount of like you could have the best mindset coach in the world, but if you don't have a home, and this has happened to a lot of my clients during COVID, like something about their life gets um pulled from under them, right? Their housing situation or their employment gets compromised, and like from there, like the deep transformational work has to pause.
Yeah.
It has to, right? Because then it's not safe.
Hmm.
The nervous system can't rest into the healing. So from there, we're like, okay, like what do we need to do to get you back on track? What do we need to get employment, unemployment? Like what needs to happen, right? So you can get that baseline. Yeah.
So, what is it, as an entrepreneur and a healer, you have been doing to stay grounded, especially when a lot of the clients you're serving may be under those challenging times? And
Hmm.
also, what is it that you've had to learn to release?
Hmm. So what have I had to learn to release, and how do I help myself through the challenges of of just coaching and the challenges around that?
And also discerning what is and isn't yours to carry.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because the problem is some of this is subconscious, and if you look at the mind, we only have access to 5% of the mind. The rest is subconscious and unconscious. So on the conscious mind, you're like, "Ugh, why do I keep attracting broke clients? Like why? I don't want to, but underneath there's this like little root. There's this little sneaky thing that's coming through. So how do you get to know that sneaky thing? You meditate every day. I meditate every day, or I journal every day. I do my practice. I pray every day, right? That's what floats my boat. Whatever floats your boat. But you get to know that, because otherwise, that subconscious programming will run your life. It's like someone else is driving the ship, the boat, the car, whatever you want to be in, and you don't know. You think like, well, I kind of know that I don't like that, but I don't know why I can't change it. And that's why when we go into deep meditative states, we can come in contact with those subconscious patterns. You can be in contact and you can see, and sometimes it's like this light bulb goes off and it's like, oh, holy shit, I had no idea why I keep manifesting the same kind of person or the same kind of experience. And like, now I see it, because this part of my childhood is unresolved within me, like way deep down below the surface. And she keeps coming forward. And I've been meditating and been committed to deep spiritual practice since I was about 17 and still dealing with this. Maybe I just came with a lot of karma in this life, or maybe this is how it is for everybody. But, you just keep playing while you're healing. It's like, okay, okay, I've done my healing work. Now I can go play, right? It's like, it can be fun too. You can play and dance and have orgasms like throughout all these processes, right? So yeah, I would say like daily practice is what keeps me grounded, and having community, I think. And I know that's something that you and I talk about quite a bit, is like, how do we let go of this like strong woman archetype exhaustion and like constantly expanding our capacity to receive more support, right? To let go of the need to even be spiritual. Like that for me actually is really is like a very deeply spiritual experience, and very important for me in my day-to-day healing work, is like releasing the need to even be spiritual, right?
Ugh, yes. I'm like, I don't know how to read tarot yet. And, we just have like, I don't have the best crystal collection or whatever. And I think that we tend to overcomplicate what it means to be spiritual. And being in this body is a spiritual experience within itself, being a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think people kind of make a lot of assumptions when they hear that you're like a spiritual teacher. Like I don't have robes. I don't really have a lot of crystals. I I have a meditation cushion, but I really just like meditate on my bed. I light a candle every now and then. Like I don't have beads, right? It's like
Mm.
all of that stuff I think can often be a distraction, you know. Just
Mhm.
sit down and breathe. Sit down and breathe.
Sounds so simple. So what is a ritual or practice you can invite people to do so that they can start their own liberation journey, or even create better boundaries with the ways that they show up in the world, or
Hmm.
give them full permission to do so?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, rituals, like I think, you know, daily practice is like the best thing that I can offer. Like find what works for you and find what helps you connect with you on a soul level, right? Because I think if we're sourcing anything from the outside, right? If we're sourcing any sort of questions from the outside, we're always going to be confused, right? It's like I'm always trying to, figure out for myself, like, okay, do I want to speak up in this meeting, or am I just here to be this silent, beautiful, gorgeous force that just sits in a room? And the only way to really know is to like be able to check in with myself to know myself on a soul level, not on the I level, not on the ego level, but deeper, like underneath the unconscious, underneath the subconscious, right? That's like the best thing I can offer. I think like the second piece that just really sticks out to me is like find your people, like find your tribe, especially if you're in a place where you find yourself just sharing yourself more in a public way. It's gonna happen that you might lose friends, right? You might lose people that you thought you once loved. And so when you're ready to make changes to be yourself, to stop playing small for others, to stop putting parts of yourself in a box because you're afraid of what other people may think or people will be uncomfortable, you absolutely need support. You cannot do that alone. Unless you potentially put yourself in a place where you go into a depressive state, and I don't want that for you. So the best thing to do, I think, and what I tell all my clients as well, is like, you need a daily practice that you are so committed to. Like, you need to be so good about your health and wellness that it's like not a thing. It's just a part of your life that you fucking nail. And then you need community. Without those things, please don't do any transformational work. Like, please don't open up caverns in your soul and the shadows. It's not safe. And I hate that people out there in the world are telling people to do it at times, and they don't really have the infrastructure in place, because it can bring a depression on. And when you're doing deep transformational work, you can feel really naked and like you feel kind of broken because you're growing, right? And you really want to have those things in place. So in like my programs, right, we guide people through how to do this. So if you claiming who you are in a publicly in a new way, and you lose friends, that hole can be filled with practice and an accountability buddy, a Facebook group, Slack chains, like live meetups on Zoom, retreats, gatherings, so that you don't feel alone. And, right? That's really important, I think, as you make those changes.
Yeah, and if you cannot find a community, then you create one. And of course, like that's what I'm so jazzed up about, because I know that I'm not for everyone and you're not for everyone, and we just get to speak to our 10 soul aligned people very well, versus trying to be this huge influencer where we get as many people in the room, where we try to sell as many tickets as possible because we want to be accessible, and then we run the risk of causing even more harm. Because what is it that people are looking for at the end of the day? At least my belief is that it's to be seen, heard, and felt, and that can only be done in intimacy, which is what we both thrive off of.
Yeah, yes, because essentially, as you become you and as you do you, like, some people just won't resonate with that, guys. Like, they just won't. And it's not personal. It's like vanilla ice cream. More people resonate with that. But if you start to fine tune yourself and you become like vanilla with like organic mint and like a little bit of cacao on the side, like, less people are gonna be into that, right? But it's just so much more refined and specific and elevated and exciting. So, it's definitely, I think a lot of people, I've stayed small for lovers, for past friends, even business partners. And I know it's hard at times to say no to something, even when you know that it's just not a match anymore, right? But that's why I really do feel like support in a community is key.
Sorry, I'm still caught up in the vanilla ice cream with the mint and cacao, because that's my jam. We can hang out. I
My
might eat the whole I might eat the whole thing myself, but your other people's yuck is probably my yum.
but like, we found each other, right? Like, it clicks for us, but for somebody else, that'd be like, what the fuck? That's the beauty of finding people, finding communities. Like, all of a sudden you thought you were crazy, and now you're like, oh, everybody fucking, keeps their moon blood, and like uses it for ritual. Oh, like tons
Or
of people.
facials.
Yeah, it's like tons of people, right? Like,
Yeah.
kind of shit.
So my last question is, if you could envision yourself as a future ancestor
Mhm.
speaking to the version of Charlotte who didn't know that this other life would be possible, or perhaps speaking to other younger Charlottes who have yet to awaken to their own Dharma, what is it that you would say?
Mm. I would say there are songs that only you can sing. There are poems that only you can write. There are paintings that only you can paint. There are dances that only you can dance. There are specific codes that only have been given to you. And if you don't unlock it, like if you don't answer the call, it's never going to be heard. It's never going to be seen. No one will ever know what that song was. No one will ever know what that poem was. So step up, step up. We need it. Like, I want to hear your song. I want to hear your heart song. You know, I want to hear that poem. I want to see that painting. I want to see that movement. I want to see that offering. I want to see that group program. Right? I want to see whatever
Yes.
that is, right? And like, not even to make it about your work or your business or your art, like text the one that you love, right? That's what I mean by heart song, right? Like, what is the thing that you want to say? What is the thing that's on your heart that can only be activated through you, you know? Yeah.
Yes, and when you do that, you give permission to others to also release that within itself. So many of us are carrying these stagnant stories in our body. And I have this intention that more of us can say yes to the fear whenever it creeps up, knowing that that is an invitation for us to be in our medicine. So
Mhm.
thank
Yeah,
you, Charlotte, for being an embodiment of that.
of course. And so it is, you know, and there's no one on this planet who doesn't feel fear. Like, I just think it's really important to name that. June and I, you would have no idea, you guys. You clearly, you really don't know the kinds of conversations that we have with each other of just like, I don't know if I can do this. And like, oh, this sucks. And like, oh, I'm so in resistance. Like, maybe that should be the next podcast call, right? Like, the next time, you know, June calls me up freaking out, or I call her up freaking out, right? There's nobody so special, right? Like, so special, so enlightened that they don't feel the fear, right? By no means are we fearless. We just simply lean in.
Yeah.
We simply
And
lean
the
in and we have
body
a lot of support.
and the body doesn't know the difference between your fear and your courage. It's and
Yeah.
mm, I have found that anxiety shows up for me when I am saying no to the things that I no, I don't want to say like I should be doing, but for me, the anxiety goes away when I take the action or
Mm.
when I sit with anxiety and I ask anxiety, what is it that you need right now? What are you protecting me from?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I so hear that. I think for me, fear is often excitement without the breath.
Ooh,
So
yes.
fear is simply excitement without the breath. I remember I was on a vacation somewhere and I really wanted to jump off this waterfall. There's like this, like in Morocco, there's these beautiful like caverns that you can only access if you jump off these water po- these points off of waterfalls. And I like was so excited, and when I finally got there, I totally freaked out. I was like, I can't fucking do this. I'm insane. Like, I can't do this. I had so much fear. And then I just breathed. I just simply breathed. I was like, something's weird here. Oh, that's right. I'm holding my breath. I just breathe. And I remembered this is the whole point of why I came on the trip. Like, I really wanted to do this. I remembered how much I wanted to do this. And I just realized, oh, I'm just excited. So I breathed and then I jumped. And I was so happy that I did. You know, fear is often just excitement without the breath. And discomfort is usually a sign of trauma leaving the body, right? It's like anyone who has any sort of like PTSD, you know, like when you start healing, when you start going into the memories and start doing exposure therapy, you start to shake, right? And people think something's wrong, like something, I shouldn't have done this. Like, therapy is, you know, I'm getting worse. It's actually, it means that the fear is leaving the system, you know, but without the discomfort, you wouldn't even know. So discomfort is often just trauma leaving your system, you know, so you'll
Yes.
be okay.
Oh. And you don't have to do it alone because
Yeah.
there's folks like Charlotte who are going to be like, oh, yeah, all of the things that you're projecting onto me is just your trauma leaving the body. And I'm here to love and hold you regardless.
Yeah, that's become,
So,
that's
so
it.
where can people go to learn more about you and your medicine?
Yeah, so I'm really excited for the new year. There's just so much that's moving through me around wanting to create um, more group experiences and group programs and like retreats. So I'm hopefully planning to do a lot of that next year. Hopefully, if the coast is clear with COVID, really hoping to do a lot of traveling and bringing all this offline into my community. So yes, just I would love to stay in contact with everybody and just connect with you all. You can find me on my website at www.getfreewithcharlotte.com or on Instagram at Lotus in a Sea of Fire, where I share a lot about this work around self-growth, collective healing, just what it means to be a human at this time, this moment in time. And I invite you to connect with me if you're interested in hearing more about that. Mm-hmm.
And how to lovingly overturn the status quo.
Yeah.
Let's fuck shit up together.
Always.
Well, I am looking forward to the day where both you and I can jump off of more waterfalls and get some more scabs on our knees, which is what we did when we were in Bali.
Yeah.
And craving touching down on the motherland and taking other folks of color and just people in general who are reincarnated in this lifetime to cross our paths to walk on this journey with us. And if you are listening to this podcast, you are that person. So welcome. You're invited.
Yes. And thank you, everyone, so much for taking this time to be in communion with yourself and with both of us, right? Like, this is a collective experience. And yeah, I think it's almost the winter solstice, right? At least in the Western Hemisphere. So,
Yeah, at the time of this recording, yes, indeed. Blame the cosmos if you're feeling unsettled, and then do your inner work.
yeah. So people are gathering right now. This is the time to gather, right?
Mm.
So just, yeah. Thank you, June, so much for letting me be part of your amazing web of community as always. And yeah, just sending everyone tons of collective love. Mm. Mm.